Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to think about the absolute last time you walked away from a conversation. The words were spoken, you said your goodbyes, and the physical interaction, well, it officially ended, right? But for so many of us, the end of that conversation is actually just the beginning of an incredibly grueling mental review. Without any sort of conscious agenda, our minds just immediately go to work replaying the entire exchange on a loop. It's what we call an architecture of social echoes, this massive structure built entirely in our heads out of words that have already faded away.
Did I make it awkward? Look, if you're an overthinker, this phrase is practically a reflex at this point. Almost instantly after walking away, the anxious review kicks in. You start dissecting the energy of the room, the cadence of the goodbye, even those tiny fleeting expressions on the other person's face. You immediately start wondering if you were the one who made things weird. It's kind of fascinating, albeit deeply, deeply uncomfortable, how quickly we cast ourselves as the villain in our own social interactions. And then, right on the heels of that first question, comes this one. Did I say too much? Oh man, did I overshare? Did I sound weird? Listen, if you experience this sudden wave of discomfort, you are absolutely not alone. What's actually happening here is that your brain is constantly, vigilantly scanning for possible social mistakes. The psychology behind this tells us that some people instantly review every interaction as a way for the mind to sort of check for errors. You aren't crazy, I promise. You just have a mental radar system that is highly tuned to catching potential missteps.
Section 1. The Post-Conversation Spiral, Anatomy of the Aftermath.
Okay, let's dive into this timeline of psychological decay. At minute 1, right after the talk ends, your brain does that initial scan for mistakes we just talked about. You're basically grading your own performance. But by hour 1, say you text them a follow-up or you're just waiting for a sign that everything is normal, well, suddenly, silence starts to feel incredibly suspicious. And by hour 3, that suspicion has completely degraded into assuming the absolute worst. It brilliantly shows exactly how one single, seemingly simple conversation morphs into this prolonged, uncomfortable mental spiral that can literally ruin your entire afternoon.
Section 2. Scanning for threats, misunderstanding fear.
So, why does that spiral happen in the first place? It really comes down to how overthinkers scan for social threats, which is driven by this deep-seated, profound fear of being misunderstood. Overthinkers know better than anyone that words can be taken in a million different ways. I mean, you know exactly what your intention was, but your brain just agonizes over how you were perceived. You keep wondering how you actually sounded out loud. You worry that your tone felt off, or maybe your sarcasm was taken as literal hostility. That fundamental gap between intention and perception is exactly what keeps simple, everyday talks stuck in our minds on an endless loop.
Section 3. The Weight of Silence, Searching for Certainty.
Now this brings us to the primary villains of the overthinking mind, the variables we simply cannot control. And the most imposing of these is the weight of silence. Delayed replies and unfinished answers, they are absolute kryptonite to a mind that is desperately searching for certainty. To an overthinker, a delayed reply never just means the person is busy, it feels emotionally loaded. There is literally nothing that induces panic, quite like watching those 3 little typing dots appear and disappear on a screen without a message actually coming through. A short, one-word response doesn't mean they're in a rush, it feels deeply personal. And even the smallest changes in someone's tone are noticed instantly. Why? Because social uncertainty is incredibly uncomfortable. Some people internalize these social moments so deeply that they absorb every emotional detail, a look, a pause, a slight shift in tone. All those small things stay with them, making the silence feel dangerously heavy.
Which leads us right into the mechanism of the spiral itself. Step 1. You notice an unclear detail, like a delayed text. Now, step 2 is where the real danger lies. The human mind absolutely hates unfinished answers. If something feels unclear, your brain just keeps returning to it, wanting closure so badly. And without that closure, the mind frantically searches for certainty by filling the gap. And guess what? Overthinking minds usually fill it negatively.
Section 4. Grasping for control, managing the outcome. Let's just take a breath and pivot for a second. We've talked extensively about what is happening in the aftermath of a conversation, but we really need to understand why it's happening. Like, what is the neurological purpose behind this exhausting cycle? Well, what's really interesting about this is that we all logically know a finished conversation cannot be changed. The words are out there in the universe. But the mind keeps revisiting it anyway to create an illusion of control. Because you can't physically change a past conversation, your brain manufactures a false sense of management by replaying it over and over.
By reviewing the tape, you feel like you are somehow regaining a sense of control over social interactions that have already concluded. So, the absolutely crucial point here is that this constant rumination isn't just static noise in your head. It's an active, directed attempt to manage the outcome of an interaction after the fact. The mind literally sits there and imagines better responses. It rehearses different, more favorable reactions to create a synthetic sense of certainty. You're essentially trying to rewrite history in your head so that the present moment feels safer.
Section 5. Your defense system, a protective strategy. When we look at all of this, the spiraling, the intense fear of misunderstanding, the grasping for control, we realize something absolutely vital about this entire paradigm. Overthinking is not a flaw in your hardware. It is an emotional response designed entirely as a defensive strategy. Your mind is not just busy, it is actively trying to protect you. When you assume the worst, your brain isn't attacking you, it's acting as your loyal, albeit overly aggressive, mental bodyguard. It's trying to protect you from the pain of social rejection, from embarrassment, from being blindsided by conflict. By anticipating the worst possible outcome, your brain genuinely believes it's preparing you to survive it.
Which leaves us with this final, profound question to consider today. If we know that overthinking is ultimately just a deeply ingrained mechanism for self-protection, what are you so afraid of? What underlying vulnerability is your brain working so tirelessly to shield from the world? Answering that might just be the key to finally quieting the echoes of your past conversations. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.